Hi everyone, welcome back to your next violin and viola lesson. Today we're going to start looking at the assessment grid for your end of term solo performance assessment. It doesn't feel like that long ago that we were preparing for our progress review. We've already gone up a stage for Grand Old Duke of York, so we'll be looking at the kind of things that we need to be listening out for and looking out for in our practice to prepare for that. So before we get started, let's do a quick warm up, same as before. So I would like you to, let's start with our fingers. So can we lace our fingers together and push them away from you? Then bring them back towards you. Push one hand underneath, not too hard. And then back the other way. And then the same with the other hand. Back the other way. And then I would like you to just wiggle your fingers and thumbs. Make sure every part of our hand is warmed up and ready to go. Give them a bit of a shake. Good. And then I want us to roll our shoulders forward 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And back 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then reach up. Wiggle your fingers and thumbs while you're reaching up. And then bring them back down. And then I would like us to just do a little bit of the exercise we were doing before, where we're just swinging our arms. Okay, so standing up, hands by our sides. Can we make sure we are swinging our arms backwards and forwards? And then after 3, we're going to land in that nice, natural, weighted playing position. 1, 2, 3, up and land. And our shoulders should be low and back. Don't worry about trying to find the correct hold. It's just making sure our arms are roughly in the same position. We can just make sure we've got a gap here. Okay, let's do that again. 1, 2, 3, up and land. Really good. Okay, and now can you grab your instruments, please? Okay, now in previous lessons I've gone through the setup with your instruments quite thoroughly, but actually I'm guessing you don't need it every single lesson from now on, so I'm going to assume that you're going through the correct setup with your bow hold. And with setting up holding your violin properly or your viola properly. And we're just going to go straight in with a new type of warm-up. Now, you've done quite a lot of using our left-hand fingers to create notes. I want to move us on to playing a scale. Now, scales are things that all musicians practice for the whole of their playing career. They're really, really good practice for making sure we've got a really nice sound, for making sure our hands are doing the correct thing. And they're really good for us at this stage because it brings together everything we've been learning so far. You also have to do them for music exams if you ever do an exam on your violin or viola, so it's good to get the practice in early. So we're going to do something called a D major scale, and on your instrument, all that means is you're going to start on an open D string. You're going to climb up one note at a time, go onto the A string, until you reach that next D, which of course is our 3rd finger on our A string. At that point, we would just go back down. Over onto the D string. So just one note after the other. Now, a couple of things to listen out for. The main one is we need to make sure that when we play with our 2nd finger, there is a gap between our 1st and 2nd finger. So we should go oh, 1, and then a wide gap between 1st and 2nd finger. But then our 3rd finger must be right next door. You can see here there's just no gap whatsoever. My 3rd finger is almost on top of my 2nd finger. And then, as you have prepared for already without even realizing it with your rainbow exercises, when we go onto the A string, we just need to make sure that we drop our right arm slightly to go onto the A string. Okay, so just listen to it through. And I'll explain as I go one more time. So we go open D, 1st finger E, stretch for F sharp, next door 3rd finger for G, over onto the A string, 1st finger for B, stretch for a C, and then right next door for D. We don't play that note twice, we go straight back down. Open A, over onto the D string, and then a big gap before our 1st finger, and then the open D. Okay? Let's try and see if we can play that together. So I will count us in, and I'll explain it as we go again. 1, 2, 3, 4. D, first finger for E. I'll start that again. So here we go, after 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. D, first finger E, stretch for 2, right next to it for 3, over onto the A string, first finger B, stretch for C, right next door for D, and then back down. Then 1, open A, over onto the D string, second finger, then first finger, then open D. Good. I hope you got on okay with that. I'd like to try it a little bit quicker now. So this time we will do it this sort of tempo. Now, because I haven't done the warm-up with you, I'm assuming quite a lot here. I'm assuming that our bow holds are perfect and that we've got a rounded and relaxed thumb and a spy hole there, pinky finger on the top, everything nice and rounded and relaxed. I don't want any wrists down here or straight fingers or extended little fingers, nothing unnatural like that. I'm assuming that our sloths are very happy there. They're not struggling to breathe. They're able to reach through the hole just underneath the neck of the violin here. Really hard to show this on the camera, but I'm sure you're absolutely mastering it already. So all of those things should be in place before we even start, okay? So feet shoulder width apart, bow on the D string, and remember I'll countersend in this new tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. D, E, stretch, next door, A, 1, stretch, next door, back down. Over onto the D string. Good. So if you manage that without too many difficulties, you've already learned one of the scales that you would have to do if you were to do your grade 1 on violin or viola. So that's really, really good news. We're showing you how far we're coming from the start of your lesson, 12 weeks ago. So really good job there. Okay, now, last lesson, we introduced a new piece called Grand Old Duke of York. Music for this is on the screen. Now, before we revisit it by playing it, I just wanted to point out why there are some funny red dashes on the music. Now, in orchestras, quite often, string players, or anyone in fact, will do a little diagonal line between 2 notes if they are a semitone apart. Music's made up of tones and semitones. Tones are big steps, full steps between the notes, so like an open D string to a first finger E, or like a first finger E to that wide second finger F. But there are also semitones, which are half steps, and that's like the second finger F sharp to a third finger G, where we have to be right next door. So wherever you've got a semitone, where your fingers are really, really close together, I've helped you out, how generous of me, by putting a big red dash in the music. And that's just to remind us that we need to look out there and make sure that our third finger is right next door to our second finger, okay? It's not a break in the music or anything like that. It's just a reminder that if we see a diagonal line, for us that will mean it's a semitone, it's a half step, okay? So just a reminder, in music, in violin and viola playing, we're really lucky that it works out quite logically. We know that if we're going up in pitch, if the note is getting higher, we need to ascend by going clockwise around this circle of notes in the top left-hand corner. So if I can see that the note is going up 1 note from an open D, I know I just need to add 1 finger to that string, and I know that that note is just an E, because it's just 1 note along there. So we've got D, 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 E, 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 etc. Okay, and last lesson we also spoke about the fact that in the rest at the end of the first and second line here, we needed to do a retake. So just to bring all of that together, to bring the scale together, to bring the retake together, to get used to the opening of this piece, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go back to that scale that we just looked at, which is just at the bottom of your screen here. And what I'd like us to do is I'd like us to do that bowing pattern on each note of the scale. So to give you an idea, that would go something like this. Retake. 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 All the way up and all the way down. Okay, can you try and join me with that? Again, making sure that all of your posture is correct and your bow hold is correct and your violin and viola hold is correct. Starting on an open D string, going through the scale all the way up and all the way down, but following that pattern of down, up, down, retake. And let's try and get that nice, clear, solid sound all the way through. Here we go, after 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Retake. Stretch for F. Right next door for G. Over onto the A string. 1. Stretch for 2. Next door for 3. Back down, 2. 1. O. Over onto the D 3. 2's close. 1. And of course open D. Good, well done. That's an exercise that you can try as part of your warm-up this week while we're preparing for this solo performance assessment. Okay, so going back to the piece now, that should feel quite familiar now. Certainly the first 2 lines are just the first part of that warm-up. Of course, the 3rd line is where it gets a little bit trickier, so I'd like to start off there, okay? So I'd just like to play from line 3 to the end. I will play it first, and then I'd like you to join in with me, okay? And the thing to look out for, of course, is to make sure you've got a big red slash there to remind you that that 3rd finger has to be right next door. Okay, so before I start, just double check your starting note, which is of course D2 or an F sharp. So you can just climb up from open D just to check you've got your starting note there. And then I'll play it, and then you play it after me. Here I go. Here we go, now join. Let's do that again, but this time we'll play it together straight away, straight from line 3. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fantastic. Okay, let's try the whole piece this time, from the very start all the way to the end. We won't do the repeat because very quickly I want to go on to playing it with the backing track so you know exactly how it will sound in your test next week, your assessment. Here it is from the beginning then, after 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Retake. Retake. Right next door. Excellent, and then of course we go back into rest position at the end to show that we are finished. Okay, just have a little listen to what the backing track sounds like. Okay, and let me show you the first 2 lines. And so on. And that's what you'll be performing to for your assessment. So I want to try it now, okay? So can you have your instruments up and ready? Check your bow hold is correct. Wear your instrument as a silly hat, then bring it down. Make sure you've got a nice gap here. Make sure your slop is happy. And let's see if we can play that through together. Here we go, good luck. Instrument up on the D string. Here we go, nice and strong. 1, 2, 3, 4. Retake. Retake. Next one. Back to the beginning. This time I'm not going to commentate along with it. I will count you in. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Good job. Well done. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what we're expecting for your solo performance assessment next lesson. Now, just while we're on that, if you have a look at the screen, you'll see that same assessment grid that we used for your progress review a few weeks ago. Now, last time, just to give you an idea of how far you've come, last time you were being assessed on a piece that used no fingers whatsoever. How amazing is that? And already we're up to the Grand Old Duke of York, which is the assessment level B2, B standing for beginner, because we're still quite early on in our journey. So we're making some really good progress here. Now, as before, you'll be marked in 3 different areas. The first one will be accuracy. So that will test whether you're playing the correct notes, very simply. Now, on violins and violas, we've got a slightly tougher job because we've got to make sure that where we put our fingers on the instrument is to the correct place. Otherwise, it will be out of tune. That's what intonation means, whether the notes are in the correct place or not. So we're checking whether we're in tune, which means whether we're playing the correct notes, and we're also checking the rhythm. Are we playing the piece completely in time to the backing track, and are we holding the notes for the same length of time as the music says we should be? The second column will be assessing your interpretation. Now that's looking at whether the way you are performing it is the way that matches the mood of the music. So, for example, it says on the piece of music right at the start that we should be playing it nobly and at a forte dynamic. That's what that F means, forte, which of course means loud. So if you're playing it quite timidly and quite quietly, then you would probably get knocked down a mark or 2 there. It's also assessing whether you are articulating the music properly. Now for us, in this particular piece, that's probably looking at whether you are doing the retakes at the end of lines 1 and 2 to make sure that we're in the right place for the next line. And also the fluency. Are you playing it with lots of hesitations? Are you stopping because you're not quite certain of what comes next? Or are you able to go through it without any gaps? And then of course the final column, which I'm expecting you all to be absolutely perfect in, looks at your technique. So your bow hold, your violin hold. Is your sloth happy, or is it, you know, dying a death underneath, squished underneath your violin or viola? Are you holding your bow so that you've got a nice spy hole? Have you got your fingers rounded and relaxed? All of that sort of stuff is what we'll be looking at there. And this time, marked out of 4 in each category. So we're looking at a maximum points of 12. So that's what we want to be aiming for. Some of those are easier than others. I would expect, as I've said, the technique, the bow hold and violin hold, we should be pretty secure on by now. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm not sure it is actually, then that just gives you an idea of what you need to look at between now and next lesson. Now, just before we finish, I thought it'd be a good idea, as I did last time, just to play you a couple of examples of the Grand Old Duke of York, and for you to have an idea of whether you would mark it highly or not, or which areas you think I need to improve on, okay? So I've got the assessment grid at the top of the screen there. So have a look at that while I perform it for you. I'll just do it once through, I won't do the repeat just to save time, and have a think about what marks you would give me for accuracy, what marks for interpretation, and what marks for technique, okay? So here is performance 1. Okay, so you can be as honest as you like. Think to yourself what marks you would give me. and I'll talk through what I think I would have given myself. So in terms of accuracy, I was playing the correct rhythm. It did rush slightly. It did go a little bit faster than the backing track in one or two places. I was playing the correct notes in that my fingers were going down at the right time for the right notes. However, you may have heard that some of the notes were out of tune. They didn't match what you expect to hear. So I'd put my fingers in, maybe I hadn't stretched my second finger enough, maybe I'd stretched my third finger too much. Something wasn't quite right there. So in that sense, I would say it was probably a 2 or a 3 if I was feeling particularly generous, in that I was literally playing the correct notes and I was mostly playing the correct rhythm, but the intonation, the tuning just wasn't quite where we'd like it to be. In terms of interpretation, I did do the retake that we're looking for at the end of lines 1 and 2. It was, I wouldn't say it was forte, but it was kind of loud-ish. But as I said, for the first one, I was rushing slightly in one or two places. So I would probably say that I would give myself a 3 there, certainly not a 4, but it was, you know, the dynamics were mainly there. I was doing the retake. I was rushing slightly. So yeah, a 2 or a 3 again. And then the last one is basically the reason that the other two columns weren't any higher, because my bow hold, I don't know if you could see, I had straight fingers. There was nothing rounded and relaxed about that. And of course, that means that I don't have a good control over my bowing, which is why the sound just wasn't very nice. My violin hold, I needed to call the RSPCA because my sloth was dead. There was no way that it was breathing there. And that's actually what caused my intonation issues. If my wrist is up there, then it pulls my fingers back down and it makes things very, very difficult in terms of accurately placing my fingers to get the correct note that's in tune. So there, that's where I'd fall down. I think I would probably give myself a 1 for that final one. So if I was feeling generous, I'd be marking myself a 7 out of 12. I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't be feeling very generous there. So I would probably go for more a 5 or a 6 out of 12. This time I'm going to do another attempt. I'm not going to give you a perfect one because you know already what that sounds like. I'm sure you've been playing it already. I'm just going to give you an idea of the different things that can affect our performance. Okay, so this time have a listen and see what you think. Okay, a tricky one to mark there. My accuracy, my notes were correct. I was playing the correct notes, they were in tune, the rhythm was fine, it was in time to the backing track. So I can't do anything other than give myself full marks for that first column, so we're off to a good start. But then we get to interpretation, and the first thing it says in brackets is dynamics. And of course, we know that it says it's meant to be played nobly and loud, and I don't think it was either of those things. It came across as quite shy, and it was certainly closer to piano than forte. It was very, very soft indeed. Fluency was good, in that it was in time to the backing track, but those first two, dynamics and articulation, would have dragged that down. So I would be looking at a 4 for accuracy. I'd probably be looking at a 1 for interpretation. And then technique-wise, my bow hold and my violin hold were actually good. Everything was rounded and relaxed. I had a happy breathing sloth. Everything was good there. So in that case, I would be looking at a 9 or a 10 out of 12. So you can still get a relatively high mark, even if one of those 3 columns isn't quite right. But hopefully, if nothing else, what this shows you is that when you are practicing, you want to be bearing those 3 things in mind. Is my bow hold and violin hold or viola hold correct? If so, that's going to help me with my intonation. And can I play it nice and loudly and strongly, which will be helped by my bow hold? Okay, so your homework for this week is to prepare the Grand Old Duke of York, bearing in mind those 3 columns so that you are ready for your solo performance assessment next lesson. Good luck.